Welcome to the Hustler's Manifesto podcast. We jailbreak from toxic hustle culture. We take hustler back from a belief that bigger is better, security is contingent on compliance, and freedom is reserved for the powerful. I'm your host, Sarah Duran. I'm not here to tell you how to make a quick buck. I'm here to change the way work is done so that we can live more meaningful lives right now instead of betting on an uncertain future. If you value this content, please rate it and comment on this podcast wherever you get it. If you're a freelancer, consultant, or solopreneur who needs better strategy for your business, learn more about what I do at fruitioninitiatives.com. Thanks for being part of the movement. Hi, David.
Hi, Sarah.
How are you?
I'm great. What about you?
Pretty good. I have had one of those days where it's like a million back-to-back meetings, which is never my funnest scenario, but I'm excited to be able to have this conversation with you. And this is my highlight of my back-to-back meetings for the day. So I'm
Perfect.
excited to jump in.
Thanks for having me. I
Of
very
course.
appreciate it.
Yeah. So let's start off with kind of those few standard questions that I ask everyone at the top, which is, who are you? What is your work? And why do you do it?
I'm David. I'm 29 years old. I'm from Czech Republic. I believe I'll be the second person from Czech Republic you have on this podcast. Oh yeah, it's an honor to be after Robert here. Currently, I live in Canada, in Squamish, British Columbia. So I enjoy the beautiful weather here all the time and a lot of skiing. It's my thing during winter. As my work, I'm web developer. For most part, I work with clients on their Shopify e-commerce websites. I also do custom web applications, but not as much as I used to did. I'm more focused on Shopify e-commerce right now. And I do this because I find out that I like solving different problems and different kind of problems. And I get really bored when I need to do repetitive work again. And having multiple clients and solving their specific problem is the basis very often the same, but it always has the specifics, which I usually get most excited about.
Tell us how long you've been doing this.
I start right after university. So officially it's 3 years right now, but I cut out the first one because I wasn't doing much actually. I was just it was my gap year after university, but I was just saying to everybody that I'm doing business, but I was not doing much actually.
I love that.
And my real business adventure started when I joined a vlog website in Czech, Na volné noze. And that's when I got my real first clients. And I really understood that nobody is really waiting for you in the world and you need to make the place for yourself. Well, I was 26 back then. I was young and stupid. I'm still young, still stupid, but maybe a little bit less. And that's when I understood that it's going to take time, a lot of work to get to places to get to the level of business you can read about when Robert is, or you're writing your newsletter and I read the articles. I was like, yeah, that makes so much sense, but it's going to take a while to get there. So basically 2 years.
Okay. So for folks who are listening who haven't heard Robert's episode, we'll make sure to link that in the show notes below. I think that, David, one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on is because you reached out and said that the podcast, the content, the advice is great, but sometimes it feels like a little bit over the head of someone who's at the beginning, and not over the head in a way where you can't grasp it yet. But like you said, it's pointing to a piece of the journey that is farther away from where you might be now. And so how do we think about what kinds of content and advice and information a newer freelancer might need? And I was like, why don't we just have you on the podcast and talk about that very thing? Tell us a little bit about the journey. You've been doing this for officially 2 years. And I think it's really interesting that this was your first job out of university, because I think a lot of people will leave university and get a quote unquote normal job and then come to a place several years in where they're like, oh, I need to do something different. But this is a leap that you decided to make right away. Tell us a little bit about why that is.
Yes. So this is probably even a little more specific about the journey I have. It's, as you said, I kind of leave the university and have no experience basically. So it was even harder for me to find a client and actually to persuade him that I know what I'm doing. And honestly, in the most part, I didn't. It was just like, I just like, we're figuring it out on the way. But always felt that when I do the leap, the learning curve for me will be much steeper than when I find the comfortable job and I will have the team around me who can help me, who will build the road for me a little bit. If I screw up something, they will be probably more responsible than me because they will help me out with that. But when I started, the all responsibilities on me right away, it was a little bit too much overwhelming for beginners, probably. But I think over these 2 years, I learned much more than I would in the usual way to go to job, learn the stuff, and then start the business. It's a one reason. And second reason was that I always valued my freedom too much. I never wanted to be attached to some institutions who will, to put it delicately, be responsible for my salary and be the driving point to my job and to my effort. I always wanted to come from me actually.
I think that you're hitting on a couple of things that most people don't realize until further into this journey, where one of them that I hear you saying is like figuring it out as you go, which like is how we learn everything, right? Like I think whether or not like a quote unquote formal education, I think almost all cases, the jobs that we do, we acquired the skills to be able to be good at them by doing them, and right, and instead of learning about them in theory. And the other thing I can hear you hitting on is that being a successful entrepreneur is not a skill set; it's a mindset. And that mindset that you have where you're like, I don't want to be a couple things. A, I don't want to be tied down by maybe like a bureaucratic institution that is going to have control over my work or my income or how I spend my time. And the other thing is this thing about new challenges, which it's like recognizing early on that being able to approach new challenges and figure them out over and over again is something that drives you. That's part of, I think, the mindset that all successful entrepreneurs have, because if you're not willing to learn new things and conquer new challenges over and over again, entrepreneurship probably is not for you because it's probably
Yeah.
not gonna last very long if you are not willing to do that.
There are too many variables in a way, and it's just, you will never control all of them. So the challenges will come along the way and depends on how big risk and steps you want to take forward. Because even for me, I started with very little clients. It was small Shopify store and it took me a week to finish, but I did my toes in. It was 2 or 3 clients like this. And then agency who are doing a software for a big Czech hospital asked me if I want to be a lead developer for them for a front end web application. And by back then, I definitely didn't have experience to do that. But I just took the risk and said, yes, I will figure it out. And I don't know if I realized it back then, but I certainly realize it now that it was a big bet. I could have lose all the credits I was building. I could have lose a lot of stuff on the very, very beginning. And if that project goes sideways, it might be end of my business, not because of I couldn't recover for it, but I maybe won't be able to recover for it mentally. That I really screwed up. I screwed up a big project. It cost a lot of money. A lot of people, fortunately, it went well, at least to some extent. But this is two approaches to the business. What I believe is that we can do small steps and gradually build it, which is basically my way. And I don't really have a choice, but I guess people who start and they are 45 and they leave the job, the risk for them is probably much higher than it's for me to start business in 26. If it's not gonna go well until I'm 30, I will just find a job and I will say, okay, it was a good bet. I didn't make it. It's fine. I will just find a job and work from there.
Yeah, I think you're again, like, back to the skill set versus mindset thing, that you're hitting on another mindset thing, which is that a lot of us wait until we feel confident before we do the thing, instead of recognizing that you have to do the thing while you still feel a little bit scared and while it still feels like a risk, and the confidence and the results come afterwards. And I think that can hold a lot of us back, me myself included, where I think it's like classic type of like imposter syndrome mentality where it's I don't actually know how to do that, or I don't actually consider myself XYZ, and thinking that you are going to feel that way and then you are going to be able to tackle that thing. When in reality, it's if you don't feel a little bit of imposter syndrome, then you're not on the cutting edge of pushing yourself towards the next thing. Because if it feels completely safe, then you're maybe not pushing yourself far enough. So I think pushing that's like a perfect example of taking a risk when you were like, maybe I don't totally know how to do this yet." But being able to on the payoff of that on the backside is huge, right? Because then you have this confidence boost where you're like, "Okay, now I know not only can I tackle that specific thing, but that I have the mindset to be able to tackle challenges like that over and over again."
Do you think that when you are far enough in a journey and the train is like going a little bit itself, that people tends to actually stop taking so much risk and then slow down?
Mhm.
Do you think this is like a danger of business, being a businessman in some sort? Like when you're 40, basically you're building it for 10 years. Now you say, okay, now I can finally relax, but then it starts crumbling.
Yeah, I actually do. I think that we can get tripped up by success in a way that leads us to being complacent instead of pushing ourselves towards the next thing. So I've encountered this over and over again with myself. So I will always use myself as the first example. But you can definitely get a point in your business where you have done something, you have built something that maybe most people could never build, right? I think if you look at the failure rates of new businesses and you look at the percentage of people who work for themselves versus the percentage of people that don't, it's definitely a minority of people that do it and make it work consistently. The percentages of people that make it through are very small. And so when you get to a point where you're like, "Hey, I built this thing. I built this business. It's successful. I've got to a point where the income is steady. I feel good about my client like pipeline." You get to a certain point where it's all repeat business and referrals. You're not having to like actively seek out work. I think that can actually lead us a lot of people that get to that place get bored with it. Because like you said in the beginning, I think one of the like key traits of most entrepreneurs is that you want to be challenged over and over again. And when we get to a place where we've quote unquote gotten success, we're not being challenged any longer. But like you work so hard for the success that the thought of disrupting that or like taking a risk or like trying something new is like way more scary, like you said, than if you're starting from scratch. Like you have way more to lose than you did in the beginning.
This thought you just said, it relates to me in a way. When I first read your newsletter and I signed up for one of your 1 monthly meetup, one of the promo question you were asking was, do you feel as an employee, but being a freelancer? So to rephrase that, you are a freelancer, you have multiple clients, but you're still like an employee. I think it can be related to this, like being comfortable, actually. Like the people who have the business running, they will start feeling comfortable and they will again start feeling like employees because, as you said, it's the challenging parts which kind of motivates us to push forward.
Yeah, I definitely feel like it is a key trait of which that I think the difference between that is just separating the goal. There's different goals there, right? So if your goal is I always want to feel challenged and fulfilled and get intellectual and emotional stimulation from my work, then you are constantly going to have to reinvent it. That is just the nature of the game. And that's true whether you work for yourself or whether you work for someone else, right? We always want, even if you have a boss, doing the same thing over and over again for your entire life is going to get boring, even though you may become very good at it. But if the goal, but at on like on the flip side, I think the goal also, I think it just leads back to what is your all of us, I think, have different motivations for working for ourselves. And while I think there are these key traits that are consistent across successful solopreneurs over and over again, if the goal is I am building a business to give myself ultimate flexibility so that I can live like I can be a digital nomad or I can be at home with my kids or I can do something else. I think there can also be like different reasons there. And so I think I wanna be careful from me, like, I there's no judgment, and if I think not all of us are in a place where we're like, "Oh, I'm constantly wanna be pushing myself to this next challenge." For me, that is feels, like, really important in the way that I connect with my work, but I also think there can be different motivations for especially freelance work where it's like, maybe I do want really easy replicable work that
Mhm.
is super easy for me because then I can do it anywhere and, like, work 10 hours a week instead of 40 hours a week. And so I think just like circling or drilling down on the reasons why people do what they do can be really important as well.
Maybe you just hit the nail here because that might be one of the biggest differences between the person who starting business right now and between a person who has it for multiple years. That's for me personally, I feel still too much emphasis on my skills that I still need to build my skill set a lot compared to a person who works 10 years as an employee and then start a business. Usually he probably has the hard skills already. I don't. So maybe that is why I feel such urgently to be challenged and have do the hard skills for my clients because I still feel I need the hard skill set. So maybe in 10 years, this point of view will shift it a lot because even parts, the hard tasks, which are now hard, don't have to be hard anymore in a couple of months. So maybe in 10 years, I also want to have easy, repetitive work that I can actually replicate fast and support my family because I will have family right now. I don't have to basically support anyone.
Yeah, I think that the journey is like non-linear to a certain extent where it's like at least what I find over and over again is we move through different phases and getting to a place where you don't because we can all feel challenged in different ways too. And so I think getting to a place where what you're doing, like in terms of like you said, hard skills starts to feel easier and easier. I think that opens the door for being able to think about your business model and your work in like completely different ways, right? Where you're like, maybe I'm outsourcing that thing, maybe I'm productizing that thing so I can focus my energy on helping to develop other people or to developing these other parts of my business. And so I think that, but inevitably, I also think that we all end up coming back to you start a thing, you get really good at the thing, and then there becomes a shift right there where it's like either you need to figure out a different way to be able to continue to get what you need from that thing, or you need to push that thing slightly to the side and start your next thing. And so, what I find over and over again is even when you get to a place where you've, like, successfully built a business or a component of your business, there's always gonna be a new way to evolve it. And that I think is gonna be dictated, like you said, to a certain extent about what your life needs in that moment too. Because I think we all get to I have a very small kid right now, and so I think I definitely prioritize time in a different way than maybe I will in 10 years or 15 years. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know. but I think that it's like those intersection points between our business and our life that I think drives the process forward.
I honestly don't even know what to add to that because it was just perfectly said.
I have a question for you. So, as I think I get a lot of questions from folks who are either newer or are starting out. And so I'm curious about what, and it could be questions that you still have now, but like, what are some of the things that you like struggled with when you were like first getting started, or some of the things as you're like gaining momentum now, like a couple years in, that you're starting to recognize oh, I need to start figuring out that thing in order to move to the next level?
There are multiple views we can take. First of all, first I will say the realistic one, let's say. So if you start like me after college, you have basically no money, so you don't need to work as fast as you can. So my first client, actually, like the small clients, I got them from Upwork. So it was easy way to get little clients to make some money to actually pay rent and do whatever you need. So first of all, you need to work on the skills, and s- easier thing you will learn that you can sell, it would be then easier to grow it up. I started with custom applications, which was way too hard. It was way too hard and way too complicated to sell. Starting on Starting again, I would just start on Shopify stores or I don't know, Squarespace websites, like something which is super easy to sell or much easier to sell. And you can build a website in short time for a couple $1,000 and you're done with it. So this will be the first thing. Find something easy, which is not skill demanding too much. You want to maybe not make ton of money, but you can be able to get the experience fast. Second thing is build your LinkedIn or build your personal brand somewhere. It doesn't really matter where, but start even if you have no client. Just start doing something. Start getting online and post stuff about your work, post stuff what you learn, post stuff which you are interested in, post stuff what inspires you. I didn't do it and now I regret it deeply because it's 2 or 3 years of building this brand, which now I'm missing, and I can feel it a lot right now. So this is the real part, as I think you can do it. And now the theoretical one. If I have money, I would hire a business coach and work from and work with the business coach from the start and help. Oh, sorry, and get help from him or her.
Yeah, I think that's really smart advice. So, one of the things, and you're really hitting like a lot of the newer folks that I talk to, especially like you said, if you're breaking into an arena where you don't have an existing network or an existing portfolio or an existing skill set, I think a place like Upwork can be really valuable for getting some initial clients under your belt, getting some experience, being able to build up. It's like trial by fire where you're like, okay, you just gotta dive straight into the deep end and start doing it. But I love what you said about, I think in the beginning, and this can really vary because we all come to this work in different ways. But one of the things I hear you saying is in the beginning, get as small and specific as possible, which is actually advice that I think is really important all the way through your entrepreneurial journey, where it's like the more specific you can get about what you do and who you serve, the better. But I think also just like back to what we had said before is like you learn by doing and trying and failing and succeeding. And so being like, sometimes it can feel like, I think that advice is so important. It sounds so simple, but it's so important because I think just the starting can feel so insurmountable to people where they're like, I want to do this thing, but like, where do I even start? And something as simple as pick something really easy, put up a profile on Upwork and just do it. That is literally like my most common advice to people who are just starting out, where I'm like, you just have to do it. You got to stop thinking about it and you just have to do it. And then you will learn. You can't learn until you try and until you do, We can sit here and think about it all day long and strategize and think about the best ways to go about it. There's too many options. You're never going to have the perfect one. You just have to do it. You just have to start, and then you'll be able to have something to work with from there. I think that's but perfect advice for someone who's just starting out.
I think that we all know what to do.
Mhm.
It's how do you say it? Like not theoretical, but more maybe theological concept that I believe that we know what to do, but we are looking for some assurance from outside that it's the correct way to do, or
Yes.
it's the correct thing that we are doing. But we all know that we need to focus some time of your clients and acquire a new one. Sometimes you need to work on your skills, and some is the client work itself. And I think we all know it, when we start, we know what is it. And for the basis, that's all that matters. It's like more than enough, actually.
Yeah. No, I think you're exactly right. I think the second point that you said about having a coach, the greatest ROI of a good coach is not telling you what to do or how to do it. Because I think those are, like you said, there that kind of advice is a dime a dozen. You can Google it. What you and I both just said about get super narrow and get on Upwork and get a few jobs under your belt. That's advice that people don't. You could Google that and get the exact same advice from anyone, right? The thing that and this just goes back to what we said in the beginning. The thing that separates those who succeed versus those who don't is the ones that try. And that goes back to the mindset versus skill set, right? Where it's the skills you can learn, like anyone can learn skills, but it's the mindset of pushing yourself to just try and just take the risk and just do the thing, even though you don't feel confident yet in doing the thing. That's the thing that is going to separate those who make it from those who don't.
Yes. And I think with there's a slight difference between reading online and hearing it from a coach is that
Totally.
we believe in our elites.
Yeah.
And if you if there is sitting a 50-year-old person who is in business for 30 years or 20 years, it's much the experience is much more touchable for me, and I
Yeah.
can feel how much more I will believe it when he said do this and this than if I read like 100 blogs on the internet. They will all say basically the same thing, but
Right.
it's different.
Yeah.
It's different.
No, it totally is different. And I think that just goes back to, again, I just keep going back to it's about the mindset and the drive to try. Because I think you're right. Even when you get that reinforcement from someone else, you know within yourself that you already knew the answer to that, right? And so that person is just again, super valuable. But that person is just reinforcing the natural instincts that you already had.
Mhm.
And so, because I think that, and I will say this as someone who coaches folks all the time, is that even the best coach is not going to help someone succeed who won't fundamentally do the trying and the doing. Because I think you can also have a coach who will tell you all the hows and the whats and be able to help you with the mindset and all the things. But fundamentally, if you're not doing and trying on your own, it's not gonna make any difference. And so that's the piece where it's that intersection of that kind of coaching and mentorship with, again, this internal drive and ability to just try.
There is one nice metaphor to relate to sports. When hockey team is not doing well, they will fire the coach, but the coach is not doing the playing.
Yeah.
He can facilitate, he can do whatever, he's the best coach in the world, but it's the players on the field who will do the winning and do the goal scoring. And this is the same concept with the coaches and freelancers or whatever, career
Yep.
coaches.
Yep. I think that's exactly right. And I think that piece of advice is the perfect place to end because that sort of brings it full circle. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me today. Tell us about where we can find you.
I'm on mostly on LinkedIn or on my website, LinkedIn and website is basically solely focused on my professional career and on website development. But also I have Instagram where I post stuff from my kind of other brand I'm building, and it's brand about athleticism. And I do fundraise runnings and stuff like that. So that's on my Instagram. And yeah, that's it basically.
Awesome. We'll make sure to put all those links in the show notes. And once again, thank you so much for having this conversation.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure talking to you.